Good morning. Welcome to Walking Boxing. It is Wednesday, September the 17th, 2025, and it's great to be back on deck. I got back yesterday morning. I think I sort of flew into Melbourne at about 6:30. It was really good because the last few times I've been, I've always had to go via Brisbane or Sydney or something like that. Just a quirk of the ticketing and flights available and times and all that sort of stuff. And it's always a bit of a pain. You get back to Australia and it's just like, I just want to get home. And as I said, you've got to stop in Brisbane or Sydney and trying to get through there and then get to domestic terminals and all the rest of it. It was good to actually fly into Melbourne directly, even though it's just an absolute schmozzle down there. I just can't believe such a massive airport with all the facilities and all that they have. And they just cannot get it right getting into customs, fair income. If you've been or you've flown international into Melbourne recently, you'll know what I'm talking about. They've made a lot of improvements, and it's a little sort of easy, but they have the kiosk sort of to checking over your passport and stuff. And I mean, they're all over the place, and I suppose you get used to it. You sort of know what's happening, but when you sort of when you've got through all that, you've braved all the crowd of hundreds of people, and you've gotten through all the things where you got to take your photos and put your passport in, all that crap. And then you get to the baggage area. I had a carry-on, so I thought this is going to be nice and easy. And get to the line, and they're like 150 metres long, both lines, but there's no real signage. There is signage, but you've got to really be looking for it. It's written on some wall or something somewhere. There's no big signs that say, this is the line for you, or that's the line for you, because they have express lines, they have nothing to declare, they have stuff to declare, or goods to declare. Excuse me. So lots of confused people. They've got plenty of room down there, and they've done things a lot better, but I just cannot believe they just fall down, and then just lines going everywhere, and they'd open a line up and then shut it off, and people walking around confused. I'm just going on a Melbourne airport bashing spree here. It's not just Melbourne, by the way, but Sydney, Brisbane. Australian airports are just so unorganised. And when I got to LA, there was probably, I reckon, a couple of thousand people there arrived at the same time, but it was like, okay, there's shitloads of people here, we're going to be here for a while, so let's not complain, let's be patient, let's stand in line and get through it. But you can see a plan, you can see where you're going, and they have people all around telling you where to go, and sometimes they can be a little bit rude, but at least they're telling you where to go. Yes, over there, yep, US citizens this way, non-citizens that way. No, you got to go that way. And they really guide people around. And it's like, all right, well, I'm going to be stuck in this line for an hour, but at least I know where I'm going. I can see where the line's heading. I can see where we've got to go, so you don't mind. But you get to Melbourne or Sydney or Brisbane actually wasn't too bad, but definitely Sydney and Melbourne, it is just a dog's breakfast. You're in there and people are yelling at you, and there's no direction. I feel sorry for the non-English speaking people that come in, from Asia or somewhere like that. People yelling at them, they don't understand what they're saying, and the people just expect them to understand. It can be a little bit hard. It can be a little bit hard, but as always, the main thing is to remain patient. Remain patient. Just get through it, and don't worry that people in front of you haven't filled out the boarding or the arrival cards when they get to the end, and they've got to sit there and fill it out while there's 10 people go past you in the other line. Don't worry about that. You've just got to get through it. Anyway, I'm here now. That's the main thing. You just got to keep looking at the goal at the end of the line, but to get out of there. But anyway, just on this day before we get into the events of the last sort of week or so, back in 1954. Rocky Marciano knocked out Ezzard Charles in the 8th round in the Bronx at Yankee Stadium. Second consecutive win, I think it was. I think he won on points the previous fight. But he knocked him out in the 8th round in that one for the world heavyweight title. And a fight I was actually at back in 2022, the third Canelo and Triple G fight, which took place at T-Mobile Arena. Probably the dullest, I suppose, affair of all the three fights, and Canelo sort of getting the job done pretty easily. That was for the world super middleweight title, 168 pounds. So that's what happened back in 2022. So look, It was great to be back amongst it last night on Talking Boxing. Yeah, it was fantastic to have. I think we had sort of between 60 and 70 people at one time watching, which was fantastic. I think we've had about 400 views so far, and that'll probably go up to 500 or 600. So, look, again, really appreciate everyone that tuned in. But it's amazing that we all just want to talk about the events of last week, don't we? You know, I had a lot of people saying you're going to come on, and of course I'm going to come on. I want to discuss it with you guys as well. So, but yeah, look, the event itself. I mean, I went over a lot last night. And I'll go over a little bit more now, especially as far as the fight itself goes. Firstly, though, just what I want to do is obviously acknowledge the passing last week of Ricky Hatton. Really, a really tough one to swallow. I think the week before that we had Joe Bugner as well. But it just seems to be so many of those great fighters that are all sort of passing away, and not just fighters, but all sorts of identities. I think Robert Redford actually passed away overnight. So yeah, it's tough as you get older, isn't it? But that's life. That's life. But Ricky Hatton, just one that you just, yeah, it hit hard. It really did. And I never met Ricky. I've seen him fight Manny Pacquiao back in 2009 when I was in Vegas. That was my first ever fight in Vegas that I went to see. And yeah, he's just a great guy for boxing, and I can see why he was so loved by the English fans. And this is what sometimes we scratch our heads about, as people like Ricky, who you think, geez, this guy, you know, I'm sure he would have had money, or I would hope so, after what he earned during his fights in the ring. Was he 3-weight world champion or 2-weight world champion, whatever it was? But either way, just a legendary figure, so loved and respected and adored in not just England. I know that was where he was from, and of course they're going to idolise him over there. But just he had so many fans around the world, and you sort of think, what would make him do what he did? But again, we don't know what goes through people's minds. He had struggled with alcohol and drug addiction, depression. So I'm not going to pretend to understand what he was thinking, because I haven't suffered from any of that. But all that aside, all I can do is just sympathise with his family and his fans, and just wonder, yeah, what he was thinking that made him do what he did. But yeah, condolences obviously to the family and all his fans, and just boxing in general. Just, yeah, we've had so much death recently, and it's almost like we've become desensitised to it. But every now and then, just one like this one just hits you right between the eyes. I mean, 46 years of age. Yeah, not good. But onto the fights on the weekend, and of course everyone had an opinion last night. Everyone, well, no, not everyone. There was a few people with "I told you so," and quite rightly so. They told us so. Look, my comments on it was, and again, I'm certainly not patting myself on the back about it, but I just said last night that when I did the preview on Saturday before we went over to the fights. Now, if you watch these walking boxings and talking boxing and whatever else I do, you would have seen that right up until the fight, even though I thought that Crawford would do really well, I was pretty much a Canelo man. I am a Canelo man. I thought he would win. I was hoping he would win, really hoping he would win. Because I think in what he's done in his career, he deserved this type of win for his legacy. And however he's ranked or rated down the track, I suppose the fans would decide. But I was not adamant, I was more of a hoping rather than expecting, because I had no idea what to expect. And the questions were flying around. How would Crawford carry the weight? Would he be able to go 12 hard rounds to Canelo, who would be on him from the first bell? Would Canelo be able to cope with Crawford's speed and movement and agility, all that sort of stuff? There were so many intangibles. Who was the most unimpressive in their last fight? All these things were coming up, and who would rise to the occasion on the night. I think both fighters did rise to the occasion, but Terence Crawford just showed that he's a very, very special fighter, and his style was at his best. Canelo was never really going to beat him. And again, it's great in hindsight, but I was sort of thinking that Crawford, if he fought anywhere near he did against Spence and could bring that up. Remember, that was at 147. This is at 168. If he could bring any of that up to 168, I thought that Crawford would do exactly what he did to Canelo on the night and really just outclass him, outpunch him, just out everything him, if that makes sense. But I must admit, I was a little bit hesitant to make the call, because I just thought that Canelo is Canelo. But then on the day of the fight, I can use some plovers over there. Let's hope they don't decide to have a crack at me. And sorry about that. I actually hit pause there for a second. These plovers have been growling at me and wanting me to go away. And I actually hit pause. I've been talking into the camera for about 2 minutes and didn't even realise it was off. So I'm not sure where I was, but I just think that Canelo was just going to, well, just be Canelo and just get the job done. But on that day when I did that preview, I don't know what it was. It was just a gut feel. As I'm doing it, I just blurted out. My gut feel just says Crawford's going to win. And the fight sort of went the way I thought it could. But again, I wasn't sort of game enough to say Crawford's just going to outclass Canelo. It's just the way it's going to be. But full credit to Terence Crawford. He just did everything that I thought he was capable of doing against Canelo. But again, I didn't think we sort of had I certainly didn't have the courage to say, no, he's gonna do it. He's gonna do it. But anyway, at the fight itself, look, I thought it sort of started the way I thought it would, as in Canelo just coming out, feeling out Crawford just having a good look at Canelo as well. And that's what elite fighters do. They feel each other out. And I think there was a bit of a lull in the stadium because everyone's like, well, hang on, where's the fight happening? But I think it just went the way that, as I said, elite fighters do when they fight each other. They feel each other out for a few rounds. But I must admit, I thought that the first few rounds that Canelo did look like he was getting his range into Crawford without really landing any big shots. Crawford was doing his best, but I remember just looking at the screen. It was really hard sort of where we were to get a really good gauge of it, and looking at the screen and thinking, geez, the size is pretty apparent here, that Canelo is just a big guy. And even though on the scales they look pretty similar, on the night you could see that Canelo was the bigger guy. And I thought around sort of 4th or 5th round, I thought Canelo was just starting to get to him. But to Crawford's credit, he just found another gear. Canelo started to gas, which he tends to do. And I don't know whether that was the plan, but when Canelo started to gas, that's when Crawford actually started to pick it up. And you notice too that he started the round strong. And I sort of went against what I thought he would do. I thought he might adopt the Sugar Ray Leonard approach and sort of get through the round and then really come on at the end. But he sort of came out fast, and then Canelo would sort of come back at the round. I don't know whether that was a strategy or whatever it was, but he just made Canelo, like Bivol did and maybe Mayweather did as well, got him out of his comfort zone where he was able to rest when he wanted to rest and fight when he wanted to fight. And Crawford did that a similar thing. And I just think once it really got into the nitty-gritty of it all, where Canelo did find the range and Crawford slowed down a little bit, on his feet anyway, that when they got into the exchanges, it was Crawford who was the one doing the punching and out-punching Canelo. Just too fast, too slick. And Canelo was just struggling with everything that Crawford had. And the disappointing thing from my end, as far as I suppose being a Canelo fan, is that, like the Bivol fight, he would have known he was behind. Surely he would have known he was behind. And those last sort of 2 or 3 rounds, he just didn't find what the great champions find, and that's just another gear. Like, he sort of almost went through the motions. Again, I haven't watched the replay. I'm just going by what I saw on the night. And it looked like Crawford sort of knew that, hey, it's Canelo here. We need to win these last 2 rounds. So he really stepped it up. I just thought Canelo, just went through the motions a little bit, and I don't know whether he just had nothing left, or he thought he'd done enough, or just maybe he expected to maybe get the nod if it was close. I don't know, but I thought Crawford won the last 2 rounds, especially the last round big. And the decision, what was it, 7 rounds to 5 by two, and was it 8 rounds to 4, which is the way I had it. I had it 8 rounds to 4. I think I had it, I did actually have it after 10 rounds. I had it 6 rounds to 4. And I thought, well, it's anyone's fight. It could be a draw. Canelo, with the Canelo tax, he could be a round or 2 closer. But those last 2 rounds, I was surprised that Canelo couldn't find another gear, couldn't find something else to dig deep. And listening to his post-fight interview, I don't know what you thought, but I just thought that this is not the same hungry Canelo from a few years back. Now, it's understandable. He's probably worth half a billion dollars. He's worth a lot of money. He's been in a lot of big fights. His legacy, I think, is pretty secure in how he's going to be viewed. But when he said after the fight, he said, "How are you feeling?" He said, "I feel good. You know, I feel good. It was a great fight, all the rest of it." That's not necessarily what I think Canelo would have done 5 or 6 years ago. Now, maybe he's just humble, and as he gets older, I was really glad that he said what he did. He gave Crawford all the props. He gave full credit to what Crawford did on the night, made no excuses, and I think his stock went up a lot in the minds of a lot of boxing fans that didn't maybe think much of of Canelo Alvarez. I think that he was so classy in defeat. Crawford the same. Just you can't get much classier than him in victory, can you? He just said, look, he didn't say, "I told you so." Well, he sort of did say that, but not in an arrogant sort of way. He didn't yell and carry on and maybe jibe Canelo at all. He just said, "Hey, look, Canelo's a great champion. I told you I would do it, and I've done it, and I'd like to thank everyone that he thanked." And like, he's a very, very classy guy, very down-to-earth, humble type of guy, and all you guys and girls that met him while he was over in Australia would no doubt agree with that. Very reserved type of guy he is. But yeah, it's just so impressed with both guys. And this is what we see a lot of the so-called elite fighters out there who carry on a certain way and no doubt influence a lot of the younger fighters, not just the younger fighters in the pros, but young kids coming up through the amateurs with all this bullshit they go on with all the hype and all the trash talking and the pushing and shoving and all this classless stuff they do in the ring. I would hope that a lot of those young fighters and especially the young kids would look at those two guys on the weekend as, two of the absolute, well, Crawford's probably number one now, isn't he? But two of the most elite fighters in the world. And Canelo, regardless of where you have him in pound for pound list and all that sort of stuff, has still been an icon of the sport. So to see the way those two guys reacted towards each other, not just after the fight, but even before the fight. I know we had a little bit of argy-bargy in that first press conference, but I think both guys sort of after that said, "You know what, this is not us. This is not what we do. Let's just be ourselves." And I think that really sold the fight. Well, it did sell the fight because we had 70,000 people there and was it 41 million views around the world on Netflix. So I just hope that these two guys will be the positive influence that they should be. Because I tell you what, if my two sons were involved in boxing and wanted role models, I'd be saying, look at these two guys. That is how you build a fight. That's how you react after the fight and how you react and give your opponent respect and the props that they deserve. So I thought that was great. But as I said, 41 million views. The problem with that, of course, is that it's not really a problem. It is what it is. But, of course, there's been that other peanut, Jake Paul, and his crew. And the facts are facts, I suppose, saying they had 120-something or 125 million for Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. The thing is that it's a different type of event. It really is, because these were pure boxing fans. 41 million pure boxing fans. The Tyson and Paul fight wasn't really a boxing event. It was just an event. And that's how many people tune in. All those YouTubers and the old Mike Tyson fans and a lot of non-boxing fans know who Mike Tyson is. Even a lot of Jake Paul, his legion of little clown followers that they are, that all follow him, they would all know who Mike Tyson is. Hence why, they got so many views. I'm not too stressed about the fact that I only got a third of what that did, because that was just an event. That was like paying for a concert or a show or whatever. That wasn't a boxing event. This was a pure boxing event. And to be in the arena on the night with 70,000 people there, the production was awesome. I did mention last night a couple of things, though, is my observations with the event. Now, the undercard was probably the main thing. Now, they did everything right as far as the event goes. Obviously, the main event was just once in a lifetime type of event to go to, and if you were there, you'll know what I'm talking about. But even on TV, I'm sure it looked great. They had the two of the biggest fighters in the sport against each other. 70,000 at Allegiant Stadium, 40 million watching on TV. Just the money that it generated and the eyeballs on the event was massive, but they dropped the ball as far as the undercard goes. I know Turkey was going on about this whole, we want fighters who fight and break bones and blood and guts and all this sort of stuff, but it just didn't hit the mark. I mean, they had, and Billy and Martinez was a good fight, a really good fight, but to have Fernando Vargas Jr. and Callum Walsh as the co-main event was just mind-boggling. Even, look, if those two guys had went in there and put on an absolute war, okay, we might be having a different conversation. But it was a snore fest. Neither guy, in my opinion, even tried to win. I don't know what the hell they were doing. Both of them just literally went through the motions. Now, it was really one-sided. I thought watching it that it might be a little bit closer than what it was, but just a poor fight. It really was. And to have that leading into the biggest fight in a decade, yeah, I just thought it was disappointing. I know it was all made up for in the main event, but I said last night, they shared $200 million, Crawford and Canelo. Now, both of those guys probably would have fought for half of that. Canelo got 150, Crawford got 50. I'm sure they would have shared, Canelo, he might have fought for, 70, and Crawford might have fought for 30, or 75, 25, whatever it might have been. Or worst case, Canelo, or maybe they shared 150. Now, 100 for Canelo and 50 for Crawford, whatever the split might be. That would still leave them $50 million up the sleeve. Imagine the fights they could have put on with an extra $50 million under their hats. They could have literally had any fights they wanted to on that undercard. And that just would have topped it off as the biggest boxing event of all time, bar none. Bar none. Of all the big super fights in history, it would have been the biggest as far as not just, I know that there's probably been bigger fights than Canelo and Crawford, but the event, the whole card, they ticked every single box, but they really lost a lot of points on that undercard. Yeah, it just wasn't good, and they could have just topped it off to be an event that we would have been talking about in 50 to 100 years' time. Imagine that they could have had 3 other massive world title fights on that undercard. Well, not when I say massive, I'm not talking about like Usyk, Fury or anything like that, but they could have had, 3 other undisputed world title fights or whatever it might have been, unifications, whatever, with some of the biggest names in the sport, and it just would have topped it off nicely. I don't know why they had to pay Canelo $150 million. I think his biggest payday is probably less than half of that. I'm thinking. But it'd be nowhere near 150. So he didn't need 150. They could have probably got him for, as I said, 75 to 100, and he would have been happy. But anyway, that's the only sort of fault I can find with the whole thing. And I didn't really like either I liked some of it, but didn't like it. I didn't like that when we spoke about it again last night with what Max Kellerman said about boxing dying. He's the saviour, and Dana White, who looked bored, by the way. Dana White and Turki Al-Sheikh, boxing's so dead and broken and everything that we need these two guys. Hey, boxing was doing okay, and I'm glad Canelo picked him up on it. I said that last night. Boxing is not dead. I think we all forget that before Turki Al-Sheikh came along, boxing was doing okay. It's like lots of different generations in boxing. Yep, you have your ups and downs. You have your golden eras like the 80s and 90s and maybe even a little bit of the 2000s. Then you have a lull. And I know we went through a bit of an era. They call it the Mayweather era, where it was all about protecting records and not fighting each other. And I sort of get that, but boxing's never been any different. Boxing will survive. And as long as we've got guys like Oscar and Eddie and even Bob, and there's Frank, and there's lots of other, and even our MVP, maybe they'll wake up to themselves and forget about all this circus shit. I know they're starting it with the women's boxing. Maybe they'll get into the males at some stage. Of course, we've got the TKO boxing coming up as well. So boxing's doing okay. And in my opinion, it didn't need saving. It needed tweaking. It needed adjusting. It maybe needed a bit of a service here and there, a few tweaks of oil on the joints, but it was doing okay. The big fights were still getting made. And it was just one of those eras we're in. Now, having said that, hey, I'm glad that Turki Al-Sheikh's involved. I'm even glad that Dana White's involved. The more the merrier, all competing against each other can only make the sport better. But I'd really like Canelo took offence that Max Kellerman, who's been a boxing man for however long, would stand up and say boxing is dead and we need these guys to fix it. I just thought it was classic ass kissing and it didn't need to be said. And again, I'm glad that Canelo said, hey. Boxing is big. It's bigger, it's biggest, or whatever the hell he said. And I'll say it again, as much as UFC have shown us the way to go over the last few years, when there's a massive big boxing event, UFC is very, very quickly forgotten, I can tell you, because boxing just pushes a little brother aside and says, here, step aside. Time for the big boys to come in. The problem is it doesn't happen often enough, but I'm sure it will. I think the big thing with it, and I don't think it's going to happen because it's all about Riyadh season and all that sort of stuff. If we had someone like Turki Al Sheikh doing what he's doing, but in America and England with those massive cards, I think it would be so much different. I think we would be talking about massive events, because it's really hard for those fighters on those cards to get motivated. It's all just about money, which is why we don't get those classic fights. We get the little pity-pat fights we've had at Times Square and obviously Canelo and School. There's no real motivation. But imagine if we had someone like Turki Al Sheikh saying, all right, well, 3 or 4 times a year, we're going to do events like that in Vegas and do a full stack card of, 4 or 5 mega fights on one card at, say, Allegiant Stadium or wherever it might be. That would, I think, be a lot better than what they're doing now, because Riyadh season, they have some good cards, but they just don't. There's just no atmosphere there. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents. But overall, look, we had a great week. You would have seen also with what happened with Cooper O'Connell over there with the training in the gyms and the sparring that he got. Fantastic for him, and best of luck to him going forward. But yeah, fantastic to get away. It was only a quick one. It was only a week. But I really enjoyed it, and I hope you did too. And thanks again for all the messages of support for all the videos that I did over there. All right, guys, that's probably going to do it for today. As always, give me your thoughts. I'm sure you will. Did you back Crawford, or are you like a lot of other people out there this week, wiping egg off your face? Let us know. And have a great Wednesday. We'll catch you tomorrow.